So, guys, hi, I'm Tim.
Felix.
Today, we want to speak about the role of a buyer's agent and what they do. So, I want to ask Felix a few interview type questions so that everyone can get a better understanding of how a buyer's agent can help you. So, Felix, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. So with buyer's agents, as you know, in the industry, you have a seller's agent, which works for the vendor. A buyer's agent predominantly works purely for the buyer. And in our space, what we do, especially what we do for our clients, is we customize our journey for our clients. So we're there to really listen and try to understand exactly what they're looking to accomplish in that property space. And based on that, we'll go out and we'll source and find properties according to their brief. But more importantly, it's more about that guiding process and giving them that sense of mentorship, but also that confidence. I think the biggest challenge in any market, especially now that we've seen in the last probably 12 to 18 months, is it's been a very, very competitive market. And so the benefits of a buyer's agent is that not only are we professionals in the space, but we're able to guide our clients through that entire process. And sellers agents aren't what they used to be, where they'll just kind of categorize as a general sales representative. They're actually a lot more educated, a lot more kind of savvy. So they know obviously certain negotiation tactics that a lot of buyers aren't aware of. So as a buyer's agent, we're able to help our clients navigate through that and just give them that peace of mind through that whole journey. So usually they're kind of the key principles as to why people will engage buyer's agent. We find that clients that do come to us are typically maybe time poor, been in the market for quite some time and just frustrated and just found that they've missed out all the time. I've had a couple of clients where they're first-time buyers, never been to an auction, just really wanted someone professional be there to bid for them on the day because they just didn't understand the whole concept between how to strategize and how to put in, a confident bid and not feel pressured by the auctioneer or the other competition. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. It was just recently, I've had like a couple of young clients that have gone to auction and they've actually filmed themselves bidding for me a couple of times. And the first, I can see the progress, like on the first auction that they attended, which was a property they really loved, they were so scared to actually put their hand up and put a bid in. I think they just weren't sure what the process was. They ended up losing a property that sold for about 200,000 less than what it was worth, which was a great opportunity, and they loved the property, and they were kicking themselves for like weeks afterwards. So I think really having someone such as yourself who's confident speaking to an agent is such an important thing that people can leverage. The other thing that you mentioned as well was that sellers agents have tactics that they use, and I've seen in a property that I recently sold, I remember the agent said to me that he took potential buyers into a boiler room. And I thought that I would hate to be on the receiving end of being in a boiler room. So I can absolutely understand why someone would want to outsource that sort of stress and hire a surrogate to take on the stress of purchasing, especially if you're looking in these areas where you've got really high performing agents, which is, I think the quality of agent has lifted a lot recently as well. And it's the training that goes into it and the sales techniques and all those sorts of things. There really is a lot of pressure and things that are happening behind the scenes to try and lift the prices. So having someone who's your advocate, I can understand why that's such a important thing to have access to.
And touching on that point with auction, a lot of people think it's just that 15 or 30 minutes at the auction that plays. And it's people who go into a boxing match, they say it's not about what happens in the ring, it's what happens, all that preparation that happens beforehand. And very much the same when you go to an auction. When I take clients, it's all about understanding that market, understanding what's sold in there, understanding where the market trend is leading to, so that you can make a confident decision on the day what your maximum value will be, but also then tying into what are your personal attributions as to why you're looking to buy that particular property. Because if it's your family home, you're going to be there for the next 40 years, it's a long-term investment. So it's actually worth considering maybe paying a bit more to get something you love, because it's going to be a long-term investment and the price is going to keep growing over time rather than missing out week in, week out. So do
you find that when you sit down with, say, a couple or an individual and start asking them questions about why they're looking to buy, do you find that their original direction changes? you know, when you ask those probing questions, do they suddenly realize, oh, maybe I'm not looking at what I thought was important to me?
Yeah, look, it happens, and that's probably one of the good reasons why people do look towards a buyer's agent, because we're looking at the market from a bigger aspect as opposed to just what's in their neighborhood, and giving them more of a bigger understanding in terms of, okay, well, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? And what does it look like in the next 5 to 7 years? And then it gives them more perspective in terms of, oh, wow, we haven't thought about all those considerations. And when we do that, we actually look at it. When we take on a brief, we actually look at it from I guess, a macro scale, and then kind of bring that back in and say, okay, well, what is it that actually still works really well for you? But now we've opened up a few more options to consider. And that gives them more confidence that they're actually making the right decision. So ultimately, in the day when they do buy the property, like, yeah, we've ruled out all the other options, and this is what we're actually comfortable working with. So that's one of the things that I love doing, like really sitting down and mapping it out with the clients and taking that time to listen and asking those key questions, and not so much, okay, well, you know, what's the location you're looking at, and that's
more look, I think, like, I can see, you know, with something that is such an expensive purchase, the last thing that you want would be to have buyer's remorse. You spend $2 million and you're like, no, I can't take this back. There's no receipt for this one.
You have like a 30-year commitment on it as well.
Yeah, exactly. You change that, so you don't want to have any remorse. What about, do you find in, like, today, in sort of the last 6 to 12 months, have you been working more with, like, people who are buying for a property for themselves to live in, or for investors?
That's a good question. At the start of the year, majority of my clients were homeowners, and I've seen a big shift in terms of investors coming on board.
Why do you think that is?
A lot of it's probably due to FOMO. Like, investors kind of think a bit differently to homeowners. Obviously, homeowners, they feel like they monitor the market, but, you know, their personal circumstances probably are the bigger driver in terms of why they want to move. Investors kind of sit on the fence waiting to say, okay, well, it's now the right opportunity to pounce. And when someone makes a move and they see that the market's moving, they're like, oh, now we need to get in. But the astute investors and the smart ones are the ones consistently always in the market, because they're monitoring, they know what's happening. They're not just waiting for the mum and dad's investors to then buy in and then try to make it, you know, once it's ready, made like 10-20%. But yeah, we've had a good shift. I mean, I'm working, I would say now 90%, all my clients are investors at the moment. So, and I can see why. They're obviously trying to take advantage of what's happening in the market space. And there's still good opportunities. You know, some people still feel they've missed the boat, but missing the boat in property doesn't mean the boat's not going to come around again. It's not something where it goes and never comes back. It was seen in the last 40 years, there's been so many peaks and troughs, but it's been on a gradual increase. It's not like it's gone down and then it's gone back to its original price. So property itself is a long-term asset, and people just need to understand it's about time in the market and not just trying to pick it and feel like you've missed it. Because that's the same thing here, retiree, they're like, oh, we've missed the boat, we're just going to wait now. And then 12 months later, they go, oh, we should have bought when we spoke to you the first time because it's gone up 10%. So
absolutely. Look, I've had people, I remember when I started in 2015, I had people at that point in 2015 who'd been looking for a couple of years, saying things like, oh, you know, we're waiting for the crash. You know, it's so from 2013, it's now 2021. It's a long time to wait for a crash, that you've missed out on like a lot of gains, a huge amount of gains over that time period. I think what's interesting as well is, you know, I've been to a few of these conferences where you get like developers, brokers, buyers agents, all types of people involved in the property space who are talking about like a property clock in Australia. And they say, like, you know, when Sydney's going up or when Melbourne's going up, like there's opportunity in other places where maybe, you know, prices could be easing or whatever. Is that, do you factor that sort of thing into someone? Like, is timing a factor at all? Or do you think that it's more important to just get in when it financially makes sense for you and to stay in as long as possible? Like, what do those conversations look like for people?
Yeah, I always say it comes down to your personal and financial lifestyle scenario and your situation. Like, trying to time the market based on market indicators and following trends, it's good. It's obviously one area where you can obviously capitalize on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if your personal circumstances don't allow for it, it's going to be very hard for you to try to get in, and you're going to be sacrificing a lot And that's the biggest kind of thing that we do see is a lot of kind of, investors who just start out is like, oh, their friends bought this, they were getting in on the game, and then they just buy anything, hoping that they're going to achieve the same results, but ultimately they may not, because they've just bought anything, they haven't done their research. But I think the biggest thing is that if you work along your own personal circumstance, and you kind of buy according to what's suitable in terms from a servicing point of view as well, because ultimately the bank may lend you, 1.5, but from a servicing level, it may not be as comfortable. So you want to buy within your means.
Well, that's exactly right. Like, I mean, look, theoretically, if a bank's willing to lend someone 1.5, it's because they've determined that, like, based on their own benchmarks and stuff, that they'll be able to make their repayments. But the reality is that one person who can borrow 1.5 may not have the same lifestyle as someone else who borrows 1.5. Like, you may have, like, hobbies, or on the bad side, addictions. You might be betting too much or doing whatever it might be. You might have something going on in your life or unexpected one-off expenses where, even though you've been assessed and approved at this price point, it may not be viable for you. So it's always, I think, and you can't predict the future and stuff, but it is important to have like a strong buffer and to know that you're not going to put yourself into like a negative space like that. But just, I guess, going back to your role. So is there a type of client that that buyer's agents are looking for? Like, who is best suited to work with a buyer's agent, or who should, like, what would be the type of person who you would think it would be appropriate for them to think about reaching out to a buyer's agent?
Yeah, I think the majority of people who do engage with the buyer's agents are people who are very time poor, because they don't have the capacity to go and do all the research and the due diligence. We also do find people who have missed out and just frustrated with the process. They're just like, you know what, I'm just giving up. I want my weekends back. I just want to get someone to do it for me, so that I can just move on and start enjoying life again.
So what does that look like? Just because that's obviously an important point. And I can imagine, like, because I hear that a lot. Like, people, the thing that they're so happy about is that they're getting their Saturdays back. Like, does that mean that if someone engages you as a buyer's agent, that they can stay at home or do whatever they want, and you're physically going to the properties on their behalf and inspecting them and negotiating? Is that what it looks like?
Pretty essentially. So, our role is to really shortlist and get the cream of the crop, and ensuring that they're not wasting that time. So rather than them inspecting, 10 to 20 properties, we might be only showing 3. But out of those 3, they're the suitable ones.
Oh, gotcha. So they'll still have to go.
Yeah. Look, I mean, some investors are happy to buy sight unseen. But with homeowners, it's very important, obviously. Even though the property looks great on paper, the flow, the layout, it's very different when you're living in a space. So it's something I 100% encourage homeowners. You need to walk through it to get a feel, and is this something for you?
Absolutely. It's actually funny you mention that. Like, even this place, I remember I said to the agent, I said, I'm not interested in anything that's like high up. I said, don't even show me, because I've got a young kid. I don't want him, like, being in any danger at all. And then when I walked in here and saw the light and everything else, and it was just like, no, it's fine.
I'll take it.
So, I mean, that it goes back to what we were saying before, like, what someone, like, in my mind, I had these rules about what a property had to be or didn't have to be. And then it was when I saw it in real life, as you said, walking through and getting a sense of the place, completely changed my mind.
But what I mean, over the time, I've learned to really understand what clients want out of a property. So when I see it, I just get this feeling like, okay, this is the one that's going to be for me. And typically, I would say 90% of the time, when they walk through it, it's the right property. Now, whether it's going to be the right price or not, I think it'll be a different story. But we're going to do everything we possibly can to secure it for them.
Well, let's talk about money. We should talk about that. So as a buyer's agent, like, there's obviously cost involved with engaging you. In terms of your negotiation with the real estate agent, like, is it part of your proposal to your clients that you will find something and get it for less than what it's worth? Or is that, from my perspective, for example, if I was to engage a buyer's agent, I don't think, if it was an owner-occupier purchase, I don't think I'd be so sensitive to there being, I'm not necessarily looking for the biggest discount. And even to some extent with an investment. And the reason why for me is because I know that if I pay a premium up front, usually that means that someone else is going to pay a premium when I sell.
Yeah.
Whereas if something, you know, without it being like special circumstances where I say, hey, Felix, like, you know, can you please knock on that person's door for me? It's not listed. They've got no intention of selling it, just see if they'll do it. Because I don't have the courage to do it. Without it being something like that, I couldn't imagine, especially in a market like in Sydney, Melbourne, you know, and that there'd be too much room to pull prices back. Like, has it been your experience that you've been able to negotiate a lot of prices? Is that an expectation of your customers, and how do you work with that sort of?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of people do face when they are thinking about a buyer's agent is the cost. So they're always thinking, okay, well, it's going to cost me. There's just never been an industry thing where you'd have to pay to buy a house. It's always been, okay, the vendor is selling their house, they get paid by the sales agent, and we just buy the property. And then when the buyer's agent industry kind of started to pick up over the last, I would say, 5 to 8 years, it's because obviously in America it's quite standard.
Yeah.
Now people kind of go, okay, well, now it's quite normal in the East that you pay a buyer's agent to look for the property, and typically the average is it's usually a percentage of the purchase price, and people then would have to factor that into the borrowing capacity, the deposits, and so it could chew up a quite substantial amount in terms of what they could buy. So they kind of think about that.
What would it usually be, like, as a percentage?
Look, I know most buyer's agents can average anywhere between, you know, 1.5 to 2% of the purchase price. So very similar to a sales agent. And look, I would say every single buyer's agent would want to do anything they possibly can to get that price down for their clients, because it's just going to build more rapport with their clients, but also more referrals. So, and similar to us, you know, we want to try and get that price down as much as possible for the clients, and different ways of doing it. Like just before we kind of caught up this morning, I was just on my phone renegotiating for a client who bought a property, and after the building and pest report, I mean, everything was fine, but you know, with the building and pest reports, they pick up everything, right? And I leveraged that as another negotiation tool afterwards, and we just got another, like, I mean, doesn't sound like a lot, but another $5,000 off, right?
That is a lot. It's a lot of money. I mean, think about how long would it take to get $5,000 in your savings account. You got to earn like $7,500 or whatever, you know, depending on what tax bracket you're in. So it's a lot of money. For some people, that's like a month's work, 2 months' work.
Correct. And you know, like, I mean, that property was 500,000, so you know, $5,000 off is quite significant in that purchase price. But you know, that's going to mean quite a fair bit for the client, where they can utilize that for other expenses. You know, so it's all part of not just what we can negotiate up front, but how do we continue that later on to try to get them more off. And there's specific ways of kind of doing it.
So that purchase, just on that one, so that was $5,000 off a $500K purchase.
Correct. Yeah.
It's like a full percentage.
That's what I mean.
You literally just justified your cost in one go. So I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And what about on, like, if it, just to go back to your pricing structure, like up to, say, you know, if it was a $2 million property that you're purchasing, would it be like 1 to 2% of that? Does it just scale up as property price scales up as well?
So the way we do it, for home buyers, we do a percentage. We just do a 1% plus GST. For investors, we just do a fixed fee for it. Because investors, I mean, even though there's similar amount of work, the emotions aren't there. With investors, it's more about the numbers. So we tend to obviously kind of want to have a more fixed structure that they can budget that into their feasibility when they're doing their cash flow analysis. So that's how we've kind of structured it, and we found it's worked really well. When you talk about people engaging into a buyer's agent, investors kind of look for someone who's looking to be with them from a long-term approach. The way I can operate is, I'm not here just to buy the one property. We're here to build, you know, wealth, build a portfolio, guide you through that path, and kind of, you know, what does it look like over 10 years? But what do we need to do today to utilize that? So the one we just bought this morning, or got the renegotiation on, so that was on 1,000 square meters, and it's got a house at the front, so it's yielding about probably 4.8%. But the capacity is, it's got room to build 3 townhouses in the future. So from that, you've got uplift in terms of manufacturing growth. By, you know, knocking down, building 3 townhouses, but then that's obviously going to amplify your cash flow as well. So whether you decide to sell 2, keep 1, and have it all paid off, you've got more options. So our focus is more understanding how can we build wealth for the future, so our clients can continue to move forward. I think it's very different to what it was, I would say, probably 8 years ago, where lending was very I would say, a bit more lenient and flexible, where if you had 5% or 10%, they'll just lend it to you.
If you can fog them,
And people will buy like properties every 3 months, and a lot of buyers agents were selling that this investor bought 10 properties in 12 months. That's not the case anymore. So you've got to be a bit more strategic about how you do things and building your future, and that's how we kind of plan it for our clients.
Absolutely. And I don't think, like, probably in another, when we do another talk, we can go more about it, but those sorts of opportunities that you just mentioned speak a lot to the other video that we recorded about, like, reducing your mortgage quicker. I know that I spoke about like some tactics that anyone can do if they've got a mortgage, like changing from monthly to fortnightly payments, etc. But it's really like, if you can purchase something, leverage off someone's expertise like yourself and know that you can build some specific development, whether it's townhouses, a small block of apartments or whatever, make $200,000, $300,000 and then put that into your mortgage. Like, it's a huge amount of time that you're essentially buying back. It's a massive amount of interest that you save in. And it's like, depending on what your goals are, like if you want to build your wealth through property, I can see that would sort of like create a path that someone could walk towards building that wealth.
We can. I think that's great. I think we can definitely workshop another video where we can run down some real life scenarios that we've done for clients and break that back down in terms of what the numbers look like, and then you can also look at the repayment terms and show them how substantial that is, because I think it's all about, and we talk about this a lot in terms of, making your money go as further as possible, without you having to do too much. And if you can sleep at night and things are working well for you, but why not? So it's people kind of, when they talk about, refinancing your home and drawing money out, they kind of get a bit kind of, obviously a lot of people are risk conscious. So,
for sure.
And I don't blame them. With COVID and stuff, they came unexpectedly, and people were, concerned about losing their job. So taking out extra loans is a big concern. But if, you've got the appetite and, your finances allow for it, it could be a very good tool to help you, be a catalyst towards reducing your mortgage sooner.
I've felt that recently, where people, they want to buy another property, they need to pull equity out of their old home and their existing home, and they're very hesitant to add to their debt. There's something about going backwards. I think it must be like a mental thing that freaks people out a little bit. They're like, but I've paid this money.
I've got this far in.
And now you're asking me to like go back 5-6 years. But it's not, I mean, it's all perspective. It's not like that. You're doing this so that you can leverage and purchase something else. And, and as we were saying before, continue to move forward. So I think like, if you keep your goal, like your why and your goals really got to be at the front of your mind to drive you past those short-term barriers.
And that's why when we sit down and goal set with clients, it's never about what's 6 to 12 months. It's what you're hoping to achieve in the next 5 to 7 years. Because if a client comes to me and says, I want to make $500,000 in 6 months or 12 months, and it's like, I'm not the guy for you. You
better go start City or Crown or something. Have a crack there.
And that was the conversation I had with a lot of clients, I would say, when the market was roaring back in 2015, because properties were moving like what they were doing in the last 12 months. And seeing people make $150,000 in 12 months without having to lift a finger.
I know. It's wild.
It was crazy. And we've seen those gains in the last 12 months, if not more. So,
the funny thing is with that is like, even when people do make those sorts of gains, it's one of the things that makes other people want to invest into the market. And like, I think if you're going in purely because you're expecting to make like some amazing amount of money without having to do too much work, I think that can be really misguided, because there's plenty of people where you're the one who's paying overs on something, and you might not realize anything in the short term. It might take like a few months or a few years or whatever to get to the point where it's parity. So it's not as simple as buying something and then you're going to make money. I think it's a lot more complex than that. There's a lot of mental and emotional factors. Like if you go onto any of these news websites, they say like property sold for $1 million over reserve, 800,000 over reserve. But there's a lot of reasons why that is, and often with those sites, they're like development sites where the developer's already factored in a ton of upside. They're factored in that it's going to take them 2 years to complete the project. Where will the market be in 2 years? What will it probably sell for? So it makes sense for them to sometimes pay massive amounts over the guide price. But if you're going to live in a property or invest in it with the intention of just renting it out, those sorts of massive uplifts often don't make sense.
Yeah. What I've found is sometimes you just have to look outside the square, and typically everyone loves to buy within Metro Sydney.
Yeah.
But then that's where everyone else is looking. So the demand is quite strong, and so there's limited supply.
Yeah.
Especially with development sites.
Yeah.
Everyone now wants like a duplex site and townhouse site because they know the value in it. So before it used to be the guys in the industry who were able to pick that up quite quickly. But the agents have been able to latch on that very quickly and use that as a selling point for their vendors. And so when they kind of advertise that online, everyone looking is like, oh, well, that's a development site.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just need to look outside that area and kind of see what other considerations are there. Whether it'll be the Central Coast, whether it'll be another state, and kind of see, okay, where is there not so much demand, but still more of these opportunities available? Because you could still make a very similar gain in terms of percentage with a smaller outlay. And that could be a lot more achievable for people with a lower budget, as opposed to trying to crack this Sydney market and feel like they've got to spend $2 million just to get into one of these projects. And because that's a substantial amount of risk that we've got to take on board as well.
And these things snowball, like you do a smaller project or something like that, and you roll it into the next project, and it continues and it builds up anyway. So I think like people, it's important to be patient about those sorts of things and understand that you want to be in this for the long run, and the adage of high risk, high return remains true, and low risk, like lower return. It's the thing is, you might put yourself in a position where you can make more money, but you don't. I think one thing, and thinking about this even from a business perspective, is like you don't want to put yourself in a position where one decision can take you out of the game. You don't want to be out of the game. Like it'd be better to make like smaller returns over the long period than wipe yourself out and have.
Absolutely.
Kind of reminds me of snakes.
It's funny you say that, because I've had people where they're like, they come to me and they want to get straight into the development game. And then I kind of just go, let's take a step back. What's your experience? What have you done in the past?
I haven't even painted a wall.
Well, what other projects have you done? Have you got any other investment properties? And
the bank asks them that. Like if you go to apply for finance, if you're going as a developer, like whether it's like private or institutional finance, or even if it's like a regular one of the majors or whatever, they'll want to know what your portfolio is. What is your experience? If you're planning to be the developer, if you're planning to just buy the block and outsource everything and have a project, different thing, then they'll ask for that person's portfolio experience. But if you're doing it yourself, and like if you haven't even changed the light bulb, why would they lend you? Why would they lend you millions of dollars to complete your project? It just doesn't make sense. And
I always say, like, if you haven't been in that game and you haven't got enough asset backing, it's worth investing in a couple of assets to start to build your foundation. Just so you've got that equity as a safety mark. So if anything happened during that development, you had something to fall back on, as opposed to your main residence. So, and I think, a lot of people hear these stories that this guy's made $1 million in this development. They're like, oh, wow, it's so simple. But
it's not.
Exactly.
If it was simple, you wouldn't see these towers on the news like cracking, crumbling. It's complicated. Like building a large structure, or building any structure, is complicated. There's many steps. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of like paper that needs to be shuffled, and then there's also physical work that needs to be done.
And that's one of the areas. Like, I mean, we're focused, like I mentioned to you earlier, like as we move into 2022. Our focus is going to be more heavily driven on, looking at sites where you can obviously do more work to them, but that's leveraging of our expertise and our understanding of the specific areas so we can guide our clients in a more informative way. And, one of the sites that I love the most are the ones where you can subdivide the block. So very, very simple. You don't have to bulldoze anything. You've got the house at the front, servicing the loan already. All you're literally doing is, applying for council for a subdivision, changing the boundaries, and then just building another dwelling. That's probably the most simplest thing that you can do, but one of the hardest to find. And it's hard in a sense if you don't know what you're looking for.
It reminds me of I'm pretty sure it was like Henry Ford who was saying, like, I don't need to know the specifics about this and that because I can just hire someone to do it for me. And going full circle into the value proposition of a buyer's agent is like, if you're if your specialty is like, if you're an engineer or a doctor or whatever your profession is, like, doesn't it make more sense for you to stick to doing that and to be the best that you can be in that, and to leverage off an expert's knowledge in another field? Do you know what I mean? Like, would I learn how to operate on myself? If I got sick, like it just, like, I mean, it sounds ridiculous.
Jump on Google.
Yeah. So it's like, no, you wouldn't. I'm not gonna like anesthetize myself and then chop. No. So it's like, why not put aside, like, if cost is a hurdle, then like, I think that there's a mental shift that needs to change, because like, having someone on your team, leveraging someone else's experience, it makes sense to pay for that, because you're ultimately going to get a better outcome.
Yeah.
Even if the outcome is time saved, like, I think sometimes there's a disassociation between money and time, but really, like, for the majority of people, your earning is based on your time that you spend doing some task.
Correct. Yeah.
So if I can pay, like, say, a percentage or a flat fee, or however the cost is charged for leveraging a buyer's agent's expertise, I'm essentially buying back the time. And not only that, but also the stress. Like, I think my role is similar to yours. As a mortgage broker, sometimes I feel like my role is to be like the surrogate for stress for people, so that they don't have to sit in front of like a lending manager for 2 hours, and watch them like type on their computer, so that they don't have to wait on holds. So that they've got a single person that they can contact, at broader hours than a bank usually. And I can feel like that would be the same thing for you. Like, you're almost a surrogate for someone's stress, for their anxiety, and for the time and effort that it takes to purchase property.
Yeah, pretty much. You just nailed it there in terms of what we do, and especially what you do as well. It allows people to just kind of sit back, and you're doing all the heavy lifting.
Yep.
You're searching, you're researching, using your expertise and your network to understand what's the best price out there,
Yep.
and what's more suitable for their situation, as opposed to them just going to their local bank and just kind of saying, okay, well, what can we borrow?
Yeah.
So they've never looked at all the different options. And very much like for us, a client might come up and say, we just want to buy Inner West. And then we'll go, well, have you thought about this and that? Have you considered these other particular areas based on your budget and these returns? And they go, no. And so we kind of then group everything and go, well, let's look at all these different scenarios, and then let's see what's really comfortable for you to work with.
Absolutely.
And so there is a lot of time spent. And it's funny because sometimes we'll buy a property within a couple of days for the client. And they've been looking for 12 months, and they think, how did that happen? How we just engage in someone and pay a fee when they found it, like, he earned his money quite quick, but they don't realize that
it's not. I get that completely, because some people think like, oh, my real estate agent sold my property in like 2 days or something like that, and they're thinking, has he really justified like $40,000? But it's not that, because you got to think, like, for someone to be able to act that quickly, there's a culmination. One, there's a database. There's a culmination of experience. There's hours and hours and hours that have been poured into something to build a business to a point where it can execute that quickly.
Correct. Yeah.
To have a process, to have a database, to have structure, to have contacts. Those things, they don't just materialize out of.
It takes time.
Yeah. Have you got anything else that you want to add? I feel like I hope that this has given people like a good understanding of what buyer's agents can do in their value.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd add?
Look, I think for us, I mean, the biggest thing for me, and I used a buyer's agent before even becoming a buyer's agent, and that's where I kind of felt there was a bit of a gap in the market space. I saw the value that they could offer, but the gap that I felt was there wasn't that level of customization in terms of just really wanting to sit down and understanding what the client's needs were. And it was more just
we should do an episode on that. Like, how did you become a buyer's agent?
But I think some buyer's agents that might come across more transactional as opposed to more about a journey. And so
I feel that for a lot of people in this industry. I feel that for a lot of people that sometimes you get left feeling like, oh, this was a transaction, and then they do like they'll send gifts every now and then to make it feel like there's a little bit of ongoing lag between the transaction and their service. But it's actually an interesting point. Like, once you've settled on a property for a client, like what is the aftercare? Like what happens after that? Do you, for myself, for example, it's not like a one and done type thing. Like, let me buy a property and then that's it. Like I'd love to be, for me, the sorts of things that I could imagine myself wanting would be like someone who gets in touch to be like, hey, this has happened in your market. Like, did you know that this has happened? Are you still, your kids turning like 12, or I remember they're going to be in year 6. Have you started thinking about where you want them to go to high school? Like, how much aftercare or how much after service can someone expect if they're working with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned was I bought a property for a client probably 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And then he was in the process of selling his other property. He doesn't need to sell it, but he just thought, we'll see what the market is. Get a good price for it.
Get $1 million over reserve.
And it's not something that I have to go and say, okay, let's do some research and let you know what your property's worth, because that's what the seller's agent will do. But having that relationship, it's something where I'd really enjoy being able to help him through that journey. So I sent him a couple of properties that have just recently sold. And then one that I just saw that sold for like 2.1. I'm like, man, your property's much better than that one. Shouldn't be selling anything under that. And and then he was like thankful because it was about to sell it for like 2,060,000. And then he's like, oh, mine's worth way more than that. So the aftercare doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's like, oh, we just touch base every 6 or 12 months. Here's a coffee and here's a type of report. I'm always making myself available to them and making my time for any call. And I've had clients where we bought them a place and they've sat in their place and they said, what should we do in terms of a renovation? We're thinking of upgrading the place or opening up this. Where do we see value if we're ever looking to resell? So it's giving those kind of advice as well and kind of touching base to see how that's all going. Because I love just hearing about other people's journey and where they've gotten to, and just kind of keeping in touch and in tune with where everything's at. So
absolutely. I've definitely noticed that about your I've definitely noticed that, like, over the time that we've spent talking to each other, that I've felt like it almost seems like your role is like a consultant for someone for everything related to property. And obviously you've got a large network in that industry as well. And that's the other thing, like if someone engages with you and as the relationship between you and your clients builds, I can imagine that they'd be able to leverage your network to whatever it is that happens to them in the future. I remember recently we were speaking about how you're assisting one of your clients with having a pool fixed. So I thought, like, this is really gone above and beyond with this sort of stuff. But I think that it is important for people to have that because it is like, it's a complex beast. There's a lot of moving parts. People's lives are constantly changing now, like whether kids are being born, schools, divorces, like changes in circumstances, wanting to move into state. There are a ton of different reasons why someone would need to engage the help of someone else. So
and just like doing like simple, analysis kind of their situation. Like the reviews aren't just like, oh yeah, how's it going? Here's a coffee. I'll see you later. It's like, okay, well, how's that portfolio working for you? Is it best? Is there some circumstances where we looked at it, it might even be worth selling, capitalizing on the gains and reinvesting that in somewhere else where you can then go again, but at a quicker pace, because the initial stage was that your borrowing capacity was quite limited and that's why I had to buy in that particular area. So kind of reassessing and looking at it from that point of view as well, and seeing what you've got left in terms of your hand and what you can borrow to get back into the market.
Absolutely.
So they're the kind of things where you always want to consistently be thinking about how can you kind of have your assets work harder for you. So it's, I mean, I enjoy always looking at property. So there's always, opportunities that I can always share with clients. But what I found is, the more proactive you are, the more you can share with your clients. And because like you and I, we're always looking for opportunities. So we're always happy to share because it's something that we're consistently looking in. And just comes naturally. It's not like we have to go out our way to go and find a site or something. Go, oh, here's something we share with you.
They just pop up.
So many clients like, oh, what's next? Where should we go next? I'm like, all right, I know where because I've been looking there already.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, it's not like one person will buy in one specific area and then you can start to see that there are patterns in the types of people that you work with, and you can see like, this kind of project in this like local space would be suitable for more than one person, and people can act quickly based on on that shared experience as well. So like even I know with obviously with mortgages, everyone's scenario is individual, but there are commonalities that lead me to thinking, oh, this is probably a good lender for that person. Like I can tell from that initial conversation, this would suit them, or this would suit them, or maybe they like even, to some extent, like I'll speak to people who live around the local area that I live in, and I'm like, oh, have you considered, like, as an example, like just down the road, have you considered Marsfield?
Yeah.
What's Marsfield? And no one's heard of it. And I'm saying that's the point. It's a great suburb. It's close to schools, all these sorts of things, and
still fits within the catchments for the good schools.
Exactly. So. And the point is that because I work and service this local area, I find that there are similar, like that conversation has happened more than once because you meet people who have similar circumstances where that would be suitable for them.
But look, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, not everyone has to use a buyer's agent. There are, like, I share in the course that I do, how you could have a real estate agent do everything a buyer's agent does for you, and in a most effective way, and people don't have to pay a buyer's agent to do it. I'm all for sharing information, so. Typically, when I sit down with a client, I'm like, I don't even know if you need our services, and I'm giving them tips left, right. Like I get clients like, oh, where should I buy? I'm like, I'll tell you, like it doesn't bother me. Because if you can do it yourself and save some money, by all means. But if you come back and say, look, I need the assistance and help because I just can't do it, then I'm happy to look after you.
It's the same for me. Like I could say to someone, hey, this is the right bank for you, and it does happen. They just go straight to that bank, and I'm like, oh, what? But it definitely. But the thing is, as we spoke about before, it's like you might feel that you've like saved a little bit of money here, or saved, or that, like, one, that you've saved money, or two, for example, going direct to the lender, that you've cut out the middleman. But the reality is that you've actually just created a larger burden for yourself. And people can do what they want, but I think ultimately, like, short-term thinking like that, or looking for like immediate wins, over the long run, it's not going to be beneficial for someone. Do you know what I mean? If you have that kind of mentality, then it's going to be obviously nothing's impossible, but it will be more tricky to really realize like those wealth building opportunities if you're too focused on saving a dollar or like a perceived win here or there. Like it's going to prevent you from.
Well, and if you think about all the successful people in life, right? The one thing they have is they've got a good team around them.
Absolutely.
So, they can't do everything. They're not a jack of all trades. They focus on what they're great at, and they have the team of professionals doing everything else to fill in those gaps. And that's essentially what we're kind of doing to a degree. Is like you may be a doctor or a solicitor, whatever. You're good at doing that. We're good at doing this. You don't need to be an expert in that other space.
Such a good. So it was just last night. I was listening to Kevin Hart's audiobook. He's got a story about his life, and I can't remember what the name is, but he was basically saying like two things that have been a massive influence of success in his own life was, one, commitment to his craft. So in terms of becoming a comic, and secondly was like being like a good person, or like a friendly person. And the reason why I think that's what we're saying is because he said that when you're that kind of person, when people like you, if you're likable, you can build a community around you. You'll find that you don't have to be the best at what you do, but opportunities will present themselves because people give opportunities to people they like, not necessarily the person who is the best at doing something.
That's right.
So it speaks volumes to like the importance of community, and like engaging, for example, a buyer's agent, a broker, or using a real estate agent. Like we call it a database in our profession, but it is a community of people that we know that you get access to by leveraging off the service. So you're absolutely right. I think that for success, not just in this space, but in anything in life, there are certain like key principles that I think are important to embody.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've definitely shared some really good insights.
Good chat,
and I think there's definitely room for some very specific areas that we touched on, which we can highlight and really drill down and unpack in a really good way. One of the areas that I'd love to be able to share, and you can run more numbers, is obviously the scenarios in terms of someone who's just gone the standard course of just paying their loans over
Yep.
30 years compared to someone who's invested some of that equity
Yeah.
and bought an investment property, and just, running off the last data in the last probably, 2 years to
Mhm.
see what type of gains they could have potentially have made, or even 5
Yeah.
years as an average, and what that would look like for their mortgage. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think we should leave it there.
yeah, sounds good.
Good chat.
Yeah. Thanks.